still the same. You have to tell a good story, and you have to be really, really good at your craft. And there's no excuse not to be.
Hi, this is Zena Harris.
And I'm Mark Rabin.
Welcome to the tie-in.
Hey, nice to see you.
Yeah.
Back at it all the time. Trying to
All
keep
the
this regular,
time.
right? Trying to
Got
keep it
it.
regular so that everybody listening can have an update in near real time on the goings-ons in our lives in the world that we see around us.
I mean, my God, it's like peeling an onion, honestly. Like, I feel like what we say on this podcast is like, the little skinny outer layer of all the other stuff that we've got going on. But,
Totally. I've been doing a lot of deeper dives into the future of the energy grid. And it's interesting because a lot of that, everybody's been hearing about it, is data centers, right? Data centers now require like a tremendous amount of new power on the power grid. And this is like all the rage. But a lot of that, those AI and data centers are going to be linked to entertainment, right? I mean, it's like a lot of this entertainment that we're consuming is driven by the tech companies, and then ultimately is going to be needs to go through data centers and so on. So I think it's like it's just such an interesting thing right now. This is kind of like a gold rush for the energy grid. Like for like the last 100 years, a lot of our like the grid has been very stable. It's been unidirectional. So like generate power at a large centralized facility and you send it out and everybody's got to balance it out. And that's how we've done it. And now all of a sudden it's like all these new data centers, all these new sort of things that are coming online are either having their own standalone behind the meter power system, which is like just providing straight power to this data center, or they're tying into the grid and the grid needs to upgrade. Anyway, it's kind of like deep nerd stuff, but it's like really exciting and kind of really wild out there. It's Wild West. So that's like a once in 100 year transition here that's happening with our power grid. And yeah, it's pretty exciting. So I'm nerding out on that right now.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm curious about that because like, what is the status of the grid? Like, when more power comes on, like, can the grid handle it? Like, are there places in the US or, that are better than others when it comes to this sort of thing? I mean, we hear like the big stories of outages and whatnot here and there, but like, what do you know
Yeah.
about that?
Oh, good question. I mean, we need so much more generation on the grid to support all of these fandangled projections for the data center. So my guess is like first, I don't think all of the data centers are going to be built, or by the time they get all built, we're going to be way more efficient, or we'll have distributed data centers. It won't all just be like this thing. So I think we're making these huge projections. So it's probably going to land somewhere in the middle. But yeah, like there are certain areas that do have more generation capacity, but the way that the grid is designed, it's split up into three areas in the United States. And some areas are aplenty with solar, but there's not a way to get the solar out. Some have geothermal, or like in Nevada, for example, can have geothermal. Some have like hydropower, right, in the Northwest. So just different things like that where it's more about like intelligent management of the grid and then making sure that we have the right amount of energy storage to offset the solar that's in the daytime. So it's kind of like it's a really complex system that needs to be managed more efficiently. But a lot of the technology that we have today in our grid is actually from the 1970s. So,
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
right? Yeah. So the
Yeah.
grid grew after the war, World War II in 1950s, and then the 1970s. And then basically now is like precariously balancing and holding like just cobbled together. And so it's really about reimagining where the grid's going to be. And there's going to be a huge grid build out in the 2030s, which is also lots of opportunity. But also, this is where that grid edge technologies like mobile power, right, come on, where you have mobile batteries that can go and big solar generators like Dragon Wings, for example, or electrified trailers like Hollywood Trucks and other groups that are doing these things where they all help take the load off of the production or whatever it is, but you can charge from the grid and you can bring it back to the grid if you need to. So anyways, it's
Right.
kind of like, but it's interesting. It's just like free ball right now. It's a new moment that was a long time coming, but it's exciting. So yeah, stay tuned. We're working on it. And studios, they're all going to be their own power plants. They already have their own substations on there, but all
They
of a
do.
sudden, studios will have large solar arrays and batteries, and all of a sudden, all this electrified transportation equipment will play a part in being able to sell or charge from the grid, right?
Mhm.
It's so dynamic right now. And yeah, grid operators are scared for sure. But that's anyway, there it is. Anybody wants to jam further on that, hit me up because this is what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, kind of important. It's like foundation of our livelihoods out, like power that
Yeah.
we need for everything, right?
Well,
So,
and we're paying more and more per kilowatt hour than we ever have, which is counterintuitive to what should be happening, right?
mhm.
Energy prices should be going down on a price per kilowatt hour, should be going down.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Feel like there's going to be a big energy reset or something like that. There just seems like it just seems like there's got to be one coming
I
soon.
mean, I
So,
think we could say there's going to be a huge reset in general.
I think so. Hopefully.
And that's kind of what we talk about. We try to address these things on this podcast as we sort of talk to more and more guests and figure it out. Okay. And then how do we communicate this?
Mhm.
Right. And that's a big one, I think, is one thing is doing it. The other thing is making sure that people understand, the general population understands what's going on,
Mhm. Mhm.
isn't scared by it either.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. We really, the people who are out there doing these like big, systems changes and, working within those big complex systems, wow, how do they, communicate to the public, or like
Yeah.
production, for example, and bring people along. I mean, we're still
Hmm.
having conversations about how to engage certain
Yeah.
groups within entertainment. I mean, we've been talking about this for when I say we, I'm talking about like industry organizations
Yeah.
and film commissions and these sorts of, bigger,
Studios.
yeah. We're still talking about this stuff. We don't have it all figured out. Sometimes I think like we operate in a bubble where we
Hmm.
think like everybody knows this stuff, but they don't. And so you think about that within the production system. Can you imagine like broader society and just
Yeah.
big systems? So,
I mean, yeah, I mean, we talk about it a lot, but the film and entertainment industry should be a shoe in. It should be years ahead of everything else, but I feel it's not. But that's also like, what we talk about here and why we do this and try to help people decipher what's real and not real. And also, um, yeah, to tell the stories. And that's
mhm.
really, it still comes back to storytelling, even when
I
you're
mean, everything.
everything's storytelling.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and now we're going to
Yeah.
have our AI stars telling us the story.
I
I'm
mean,
into it. Imagine we're going to see our first movie with the first AI star. It's going to be
I don't even
wild.
know. Jeez,
But
I
isn't
don't
that
know.
like a cartoon? Aren't cartoons that though?
I mean,
Right?
yeah, they're animated. Somebody that's all digital. Somebody made it though.
Yeah, but all those cartoon folks are still like, I guess they have still the voices behind them.
Yeah.
This one have like it would have its own voice. Like these
Right.
AI generated stars have their own voice,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
not like Tom Hanks or something or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And that's energy sink right there, AI, right? So just to bring it back
Exactly.
to that.
Exactly.
Yep. Yep. You're in New York, right? Still?
Yeah, I'm actually here for a conference tomorrow. And I'm also going to our dear friend Brent Hodge from Hodgie Films has a new production out. And it's called An Intimate Evening with Adam Pawley, and it's an HBO original. And yeah, the screening is tonight.
Yay.
Yeah, in New York. And so I'm excited. He's such a talented filmmaker and director and a just incredible human. And just, I can't wait to see him tonight and to see the show. And I've got I bought like a new vintage jacket, and I'm bringing a friend
Oh,
along. Yeah, so it's like fun, and we should have him. We should have him on here. It's actually at some point.
yeah.
Haji, if you're listening, we're gonna get you on here. I'll talk to you tonight. But yeah, so it's just rad to see this Friends in action.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He was
Yeah.
one of the
Sure.
early Greens, not Greens, Real Green ambassadors.
Oh my gosh, that's right. I remember talking to, yeah, 100%. That was, God, like 10 years ago or something.
Yeah,
That was,
feels like it. And he
yeah.
was one of the first to use a Voltstack 2K
Mhm.
on.
God, what was that show?
Oh man, it was the TV show.
Yeah, I
Oh no,
can't
I'm having a
remember.
gap.
We'll find in the archives or something. I don't remember, but
Oh,
I remember
bugger.
years ago he was one of the first, and I talked about. Anyway, super cool. I'm glad you're going to see him. That's fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah. And then we have we'll be hanging out together. The Sustainable Production Forum is
mhm.
coming up. Um, it is
November
November
4th.
4th in Vancouver.
Uh-huh.
And that's going to be fun. We'll be
Yeah,
buzzing
come
around
on
with
by.
our little mics. And then it will be November 24th in Toronto, and we
Yeah.
will have I think an actual sit down interview, which will be super fun. I might be taking that one, but
Mm-hmm.
tie-in will be there, and that'll be
Mm-hmm.
fun. So do join us there. There's also going to be some other fun stuff going on. I probably mentioned it on here before. I facilitate a group in Toronto called Rescene about
Mm-hmm.
popularity, and we're going to have a lounge, and they're going to be
Nice.
looking at retheming these production
Oh,
designers,
that'll be fun.
construction manager, all these. Yeah. So we're going to do that in Toronto too. So check that out if you're there. It'll be really fun. So yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah,
Mhm.
never a dull moment. And yay, Canada, making this happen. Sustainable Production Forum.
I know it's the 10th year, 10
No
years.
way.
Yeah.
Wow, it still feels like just yesterday that I unveiled the Voltstack 5K in in the
I
VIF
know.
theater there in Seymour. Wow.
I know. I know. It's all super cool. Um, yeah. So just fun, getting to engage with folks and whatnot. Just,
Yeah.
always appreciate, bringing ideas together and getting people talking.
Yep.
So, oh, and this week we've got Valerie Weiss, who we're talking
Hmm.
to in the upcoming interview, and she's fabulous. And she's, an award-winning director, and she's got a Ph.D. She's really, like bringing her love of
Hmm.
storytelling to, film and TV. So, all very cool. And, she's thinking about sustainability before,
Yep.
and trying to find solutions and all, years ago. So lovely conversation with her.
Absolutely. And she just brings, yeah, a level of intellectual rigor to this that yeah, we haven't seen as much recently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's great.
Yeah, very cool. Well, as a reminder to everyone, do like and subscribe, share with a friend, go register for SPF, whatever,
Hmm.
but please help us get the word out on these stories in this podcast. We would really appreciate it. And always would love to meet with you in person or hear your feedback. So write in if you've got a gig, for us to go
Hmm.
do an interview in person, or, follow you around and do a from the field episode. We are all for it. So keep it up out there. And thank you for listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the tie-in. Today, we're talking with Valerie Weiss. Valerie is an award-winning filmmaker drawn to stories that explore complicated human relationships in feel-good ways. She's infused this tonal complexity into her feature films and dozens of television episodes, both in the streaming and broadcast space, while spanning the genres of action, thriller, drama, science fiction, and comedy. She is the co-chair of the DGA's Women's Steering Committee and was appointed to the DGA's Sustainable Futures and Special Projects Committees, and might be the only one in Hollywood to have earned a master's in medical science and Ph.D. in biophysics from Harvard Medical School. So, Dr. Weiss, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. I love getting to talk about one of my favorite topics, actually, two of my favorite topics, Hollywood and sustainability. So thanks for asking.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great to have you. So, curious because it seems like you've had an interesting a journey into filmmaking. So, you came from Harvard Medical School and now you're a filmmaker. Can you walk us through your journey and how you came to work in film?
Sure. Yeah, so I think I was always a very curious child. My mom would always say, she would get exhausted because I would always ask why? And, she tells the story now, she made the mistake of always answering the question. So I never stopped asking why once I got an answer. So I think it was just my nature. And I discovered acting really young. I think at 5 years old, I got very interested in acting because to me, that was a way to understand the why and explore so many different lifestyles, perspectives, relationships in this one short time that we have on Earth. In one lifetime, you could have many. And so I remember thinking logically, this would be the perfect career. And then I remember also telling my dad, I figured it out. I'm going to be an actress. Like I felt so proud of myself for that, why I came to that conclusion. He was like, that's great, but no, you're going to be a doctor. And I was like, what? I don't want to be a doctor. But to him, with his upbringing, that was the perfect career for many obvious reasons. And anyway, I internalized that and I was like, I'm not going to be a doctor. I'm still going to be an actor. But I did, what I internalized is this idea that you have to have something you can fall back on. I think that was the messaging that and so in 10th grade, I had this incredible biology class. I'm still in touch with my teacher, Mr. Sharon Bura, who was just a brilliant guy who chose to dedicate his life to teaching students how to love biology. And he had been in the Peace Corps and he'd had malaria twice. And he taught biology like the world's greatest story. And so it really clicked for me. Even though I was always a good student, there was never a subject I particularly cared about specifically. And this was like a light bulb going on because I felt like acting gave me the window into human behavior, but science, biology, made me understand all the other influences like our habitat, ecology, genetics, all the things, evolution that make us who we are. It's not just explained by our microenvironments. There's this whole other stuff that really informs who we are. So I became really very interested in a deep way in biology specifically. So when it came time to go to college, I ended up going to Princeton, and you couldn't major in acting. You could minor in theater and dance. And what I did for my major was molecular biology, again, with this idea of something to fall back on or a way to make money until I could, pursue my dream career. And then my second year at Princeton, someone asked me if I wanted to direct a play. And I was like, that sounds fun. And I did. And it was a game changer. I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing because it married the intellectual side and the emotional side, the creative side. And that's really where I love to live. And I think as a left-handed person, maybe that makes a lot of sense. But I feel most comfortable when both things are negotiating with each other, both sides of my brain. And so that's when I knew I wanted to be a director. Plus, I always wanted to tell all the other actors what to do. And so now I could. Without anyone hating me. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to be a director, but I still had the issue of the how. Like I grew up in Philadelphia. Nobody in my family was in the industry. There were not many women working in the industry at all as directors, maybe a handful. And so I was like, well, I knew it was the 90s and I knew that there was a digital technology revolution coming. People were starting to shoot things on mini DV. Darren Aronofsky had just made Pi for very little money and published a manifesto on how he did it. And I read that and I was like, well, I can do the same thing. I don't need to go to film school. I can make my own movie. And so I knew directors needed to control material. But I needed a way to still go about my life, right? And so I still loved science, and I decided to do a PhD at Harvard Medical School because Princeton had been great to me in terms of like developing me as a director because I could take classes and, direct plays. And I was like, well, Harvard probably will have the same resources, but they pay you when you do a PhD in science. I'll just keep extending this lifestyle that I have, which is to keep deepening my relationship to science in case I do want to end up as a professor in biotech. But if I don't, I'll have something to fall back on. And so I went to Harvard and I started a film program for graduate students. And that was really my film school. I brought anyone who came through Boston to come speak, and, anyone who was a professional filmmaker. We had Ute Brieswitz, who was a cinematographer at the time, and Brad Anderson, who was a director, and just incredible people who would come through. I'd ask if they would, wanted to speak at Harvard, and they all said yes, of course. And
Yeah.
that was, basically my film school. And then I made my first film while I was writing my thesis. And then 2 weeks we wrapped.
Wow.
I defended my thesis, which was a little bit like, wait, what's the word for this? It's the molecule I'm working on, but I did it. And I was so proud of both things, both the film and my thesis and my work. But it was kind of an end of the chapter where I realized if I'm going to be really great at something, I'm going to have to choose. And so I took a leap of faith and, moved to Hollywood and started to pursue a professional directing career.
Wow.
That's a really beautiful and unconventional story. I'm also a geologist by trade, so I've got the science background as well. It's funny, I did the same thing as something to fall back on. But just curious to double click on that. I mean, so has this deep knowledge of science and sort of like, our cosmic fibers, have you been able to use that in your filmmaking, at least at the beginning and even now? Because now we're talking, everything's biotech. Everything's kind of like, we're in this crazy world of where science is critical to our understanding of ourselves.
Absolutely. And yeah, I felt a little bit ahead of the curve, which, I'd go to parties, and if I talked about my research, like, people would just like zone out. And I was like, I hate working on things people don't care about. And now I go and I'm like, I directed Outer Banks, and people are like, oh my God, I love that. My team loves that. So, the validation of working in this industry versus science, but things have caught up. And now, sometimes people know what CRISPR is, which is really exciting. I love to get to talk about that. And I have a movie that I'm writing that's a sci-fi speculative fiction that, uses CRISPR, and it uses my science background in a very, very deep way. And it's a comedy. So I'm using it in unexpected ways that, I think would be harder for somebody who is, only in one industry to make those connections. I've directed lots of medical shows like Chicago Med and The Resident. So it obviously comes in very, very handy. I've been told only director who really, really likes the medical meetings of during the prep week, and they last for a really long time because, I go very deep. I use it, in those obvious ways, but also my process as a director is really informed by how I think as a scientist and artist. So for me, there's this check on logic, whether it's emotional logic or logistical logic. If I just don't believe a character would do something or say something, it's very blatant to me. Or, if something doesn't make sense in a script, I have to address that before I can start really using my creative brain. And I think it's good because I think the audiences, bump on those things. So it's sort of like a quality control, I think, for, writers or showrunners that I work with, that I'm able to say, hey, let's just look at this, or is there another way to express this, because there's like a little missing link or something. So I really use both sides of my brain, and I do think, the finished product ends up feeling super cohesive. And I've directed so many of the biggest commercial hits like Suits and Outer Banks and Star Trek Strange New Worlds. And I think part of why I keep being invited back to the most popular shows is because I really understand the audience's perspective, and I am able to sort of gut check everything before making the episode. So really,
Yeah. Yeah. Because, you've got scientists out there watching these shows, and, so it's really important to have sort of the perspective behind the scenes, for sure. For sure. Well, I'm curious, in this journey, when did sustainability come into the mix? Like, Was it early on because you had this science background, or did it kind of like, flow in a different way? I'm just curious.
Yeah. Well, I think, having gone so deep in biology, you can't ignore the obvious signs of climate change, right? It's just, was apparent to me so long ago. And so, when it became a political debate to me, it was just obviously, just not legitimate. And so, I've been interested for a long time. When I started to activate about it was well, around 2016, I started to do more research for the movie that I'm pitching. And so I got more into it then. But then during COVID, my kids did a virtual 5K for the World Wildlife Fund because it was a
Oh,
way to
yeah.
get outside and do something good for the earth because, the environment plays such a big role in, why COVID happened. And so anyway, they did that. And I was hooked on ways that I could demonstrate good behaviors to them. And so I wanted to model that also. So, and even before that, when they would have birthday parties, instead of giving out like, little plastic, I want to say swag, but it's not called like party favors.
Yeah.
Trinkets.
Like, we're going to do one of my daughter's name is Tabby, and we would do Tabby bucks. And so every kid would get a little piece of paper signifying that they were getting a donation. We were making a donation in their name to World Wildlife Fund. Now we would probably be paperless. I'm very paperless, but even back then when they were little, this was important for us to model for them. And then after they did the 5K, I started to do the panda paddle for the World Wildlife Fund, which is paddleboarding or kayaking. And I raised over 4 years, $25,000 and grew my team to 30 people all around the world. And so the community aspect of finding people who cared about this in all different regions, South Carolina, Luxembourg, Australia, all over this country, and activating people in that way, which is a very positive way, and didn't dwell on negativity, and the problem, but rather what can we do about it while creating community was something that, I love doing and very important to me. And then the two other aspects, back in 2016, 15, when I started directing television, I'd done movies before that. I wanted to find a tool that helped me keep all my director information in a script. And that included pictures, shot lists, everything. I wanted it into one place. And I was asking around directors and what do you use? What do you use? And people were just like, I just use paper. I just use my scripts and Post-its. I was like, that doesn't seem, there's got to be something better. And then I directed Scandal, the last season of Scandal. And it turned out all of the actors used this app called Scriptation. And I was like, what is that? Teach me how to use that. And it's a paperless app. It's digital for scripts, and anything that's in PDF form, you can bring it in. And every time there's a revision, any annotations I've made in my script within 15 seconds gets transferred to the next revision, which in my industry is a huge deal because we get revisions sometimes every day. And that can take an hour to transfer notes otherwise. And I can put music in there. I can put audio files in it. It's an incredibly powerful app. And so I used it, loved it, would just talk about it all the time. And then during COVID, when nobody was working, I had an opportunity to start teaching webinars on it. And because I wanted everyone to use it because it saves millions of pieces of paper per show every year. I actually I'll send you some statistics of how much CO2 it saves and, what kind of benefits it has to the earth. So anyway, I got known for that. And then the Directors Guild of America asked me, the president, Leslie Linka Glatter, appointed me to be on the Sustainable Future Committee, which was forming. And that was fantastic. We have incredible people on that, like Darren Aronofsky's a member, one of the Daniels who did Everything Everywhere All at Once are members. And we do a lot of work to help productions become more sustainable.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Were you one of the, so you were one of the first directors to use it and integrate it into the workflow?
Scriptation. I don't know that I would. Yeah, I mean, there were definitely people using it before me, like Tom Verica, who was the producing director on Scandal. But at the time, I was asking people, you know, or I'd mentioned it, and people would say, I can't give up my paper. All these are colleagues of mine that now use it. But like years ago, everybody's, so maybe I was one of the first, because I found it and it just made so much sense, especially again with my science brain. I was like, why wouldn't you? It helps you be
Mhm.
and we help save the earth. Like it's, you know, there's some effort to learn it, but not that much. And isn't it worth it? So I was a big proponent. I taught it to the NBC Forward program. I taught to the Warner Brothers program. I just really wanted everyone to use it because of the benefits to our industry.
100%, 100%. Yeah, I know Steve Vitolo and team. Yeah, so and I think, it was fairly new around then too, right? So, and it's evolved and it's gotten more powerful, and they even won, I think, an
And
Emmy or something.
I was part of that. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So, all really good stuff, and such a powerful tool. It's neat. To be able to see something like that evolve, integrate it into a workflow, become more efficient. Like technology is super helpful in this way. Um, I guess to maybe stay on that technology question, is there anything like, I mean, what we're hearing a lot about right now is AI and how to use it as a tool, or, people have positive and negative things to say about it. So there's that, and, other like even more like Mark created battery power stations for film, to replace generators. That was his company back 10 years ago. So like, all of these things that have evolved, maybe let's just start with AI. What are you hearing? How do you feel about that? And are there any other tools that you're thinking about?
Well, let's reverse. Let's end with AI and talk about what you're talking about with batteries and the other ways.
Sure.
So paper is a huge savings, but the biggest savings are going from diesel and going from fuel to electric.
Yeah.
And, there are incredible people in this industry like Clara George, who's a producer who consults for Netflix, and Andrea Robinson and Cheryl Slane, like just incredible people who I've met through at CAA. They have a climate change roll call where they've connected.
Mm-hmm.
I just did a show called It's Not Like That in Atlanta, and the studio was Electric Owl. And this was an incredibly sustainable studio. They had solar power on the roofs. All our trailers were solar powered. I don't know if, can you hear my dog? I'm so sorry. Is he?
No, not really. No.
And there were charging stations. I had a plug-in hybrid. I always asked for a sustainable car, a plug-in hybrid that I charged every day at the studio. And so that kind of thing, I think, in our industry is really where we all should be putting our efforts, and reusing sets, the big ticket items. There's a pie chart that says what the biggest, savings are for our environment, and, fuel is the biggest one. So I think the more awareness that I can bring, you can bring, the DGA can bring to what those impacts are huge. So I'm very excited that people are now starting to talk about these aspects. The TV Academy had a big panel that I was part of that talked about how we can, decrease our carbon footprint in the industry. So that's
Mm-hmm.
super exciting. And then on screen too, the same show I just did, there's a teen party, and like the signature item of teen party is a red Solo cup. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I just don't
Yeah.
to keep putting that out there. And so I said to the showrunners, can we have reusable aluminum cups? They're the same shape, and I buy them for my kids' parties. We reuse them, we wash them, and they're just as good. They're light. And they were like, absolutely. They didn't even flinch when I asked for that. And so, the more people I start to work with now that are really evolved on the subject, it really helps, get the messaging across. So that's super exciting and encouraging. On the AI front, it's very hard for me to address that or discuss it because, I'm very wary and cautious. Everyone's like, it's here and it's not leaving, so we need to harness it. But consumption is the same way, right? All the things that got us into a problem with climate change, just jumping on a bandwagon because it's here to, and not leaving, for me, is not an argument that's convincing at all. So, I don't tend to use it for the work I'm doing. I am attached to a movie about an AI character that ends up helping a human be more interested in the real world than the digital world. So I love that messaging. So I don't know that I have strong opinions right now that I can speak to on AI, because I think I need to think about it more. As a scientist, I tend to be a lot more thoughtful before I speak about something. And it's just so new and in our face. I have so many concerns about the loss of jobs for humans in our industry and around. What does that do to social unrest and political unrest globally? It's just what I'm most disappointed in is that we could see this coming, and there have not been any regulations in place to keep us safe. An example would be, human cloning. When that became possible, the entire world rallied around the issue and put up, big obstacles to laboratories and scientists being able to do something about it. And we don't have a problem with human clones, right?
Right.
And so why are we not doing that, in this instance, or at least having a task force of the smartest people thinking about the best way to roll this out? That's, so I think that's what I have to say about it at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think power consumption as well. I mean, we're not even talking about that. We're going through all these lengths right now to try to build and scale these data centers and put power infrastructure in there, but we don't even know what the real repercussions of that are. And so we're advancing very fast, but who knows what the outcome is. So I agree with you on that. And
Yeah.
also, quick question. Sorry, there's people on a swing set here making noise, but hopefully it's not too loud. But it's like, so as the director though, are you able to influence the production side as well as the on camera side? I mean, you mentioned the Solo Cup example, but this is like, I mean, we have those opportunities like this to use them. Not everybody's leveraging that position of influence. And how are you finding that? How have you found that in the past? And is it getting easier to do that? Or are you finding that like you're kind of an outlier?
No, it's a great question. I was definitely an outlier when I started this journey, and I'm an inlier. Is that a word? Now it's, I'm more preaching to the choir, which is such a relief, because, it's nerve-wracking as a director, if you're a guest director, to go into an established show and, you don't want to ruffle feathers, because everything you do determines if you're asked back. And, sustainability is also linked to the financial aspect of a show. Although, producers like Kati Johnston on a panel that I did for the DGA talked about all the savings being sustainable brings to a production, and how much money they've saved by being sustainable. Even though at first there might be some additional costs, there's savings that offset that. No, I think, early on, I would just email, my AD or production coordinator and say, I'm paperless. So please don't ever print me a script, a menu, a schedule, a tech scout plan. I just want it all as PDFs. And then I found a like-minded director, John Scott, who said he does the same thing, and he also does this. And so we ended up talking to our co-chairs, Todd Holland, Lydia Pilcher, and Mary Jo Winkler about this. And we created a memo for the DGA so that people could just download that and send it to production and say, hey, I'm sustainably minded. Please don't print for me. I'd love a hybrid or electric car. When possible, let's reuse sets. Like, it says all the things we can do. And so our vision for that was, if we send that to, we have 19,000 members in the DGA, if every working member sends that memo out to every production they work on, it just will start to become the default way of operating. So, that's changed. In this production I just did, the producer, Mo Bardock, was amazing. I said, and I'm always nervous when I say this, I'm sustainable. He's like, so am I. And, he was so supportive, and he would tell everybody, and I think we're going to do an interview with the head of the studio of Electric Owl so people can see how that operates. So now it's becoming cool and so much easier to get this messaging across, and the crew appreciates it. The safety meeting, at the beginning of the day, where we talk about, particulars of the day's work, I'll always mention, how we can be more sustainable and that we are a sustainable production. So message spread.
That's awesome. Yeah, I always found that like it was almost refreshing for crew to be asked or engaged in, the conversation about sustainability because, if they're not, there's always grumblings about how things could be better, how things could be different. And if we were just doing this or, whatever. And so flipping that and actually engaging and sort of, I think you said earlier, activating people on the topic just seems like it creates, more camaraderie and more, like a kind of like great place to work. Have you found that?
I have. And look, I just shot in Atlanta. It was so hot. Like
Yeah.
unusually, it's always hot, but it was
Yeah.
so unusually hot, I hear, for the time of year that we were shooting. And and we have outdoor scenes and it's crews working in, conditions where you have to be really careful. So I think it's obvious to people what an issue this is, and you get shut down for lightning, there's more storms, there's hurricanes, there's all these things that now affect the bottom line for production because every time you have delays, there's a cost associated with that. So if for no other reason, for financial reasons, everybody needs to think about what they can do to, try to mitigate the impact we're having on the environment. And I think the crews really appreciate that people are calling out. Now, all that said, there are certain things that are very, very hard to address. Like if you are shooting outside and it's hot and you need to get people water, it's hard to find those efficient ways, right? It's the easiest way still, unfortunately, is to hand out plastic water bottles. And no matter how much people have their own water bottle and there can be a water filling station, the logistics and practicality of asking people to leave their post to go get water or increasing personnel to do that for you, it's just not in place yet and untenable. So what we need are people like Steve Vitolo, who's the next clever inventor who's going to come up with things that help people who want to be more sustainable, help productions that want to be more sustainable, fill the gaps where it's still really challenging. And so it's, I think our job is not to judge when, there's lapses in sustainability, but rather think like, okay, we're really smart, intuitive, creative people. How do we solve this? How do we help? Because everybody is working to their max on a production and everybody is doing their best and wanting to help and has the best intentions. And so, let's use our cleverness and figure this problem out together.
Totally.
And make it more efficient. I mean, we always talk about that. Efficiency is really what we're after.
Yeah.
Time, money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's, people being able to go home at a decent hour and have lives with their family, get rest, exercise, shorter days. It's all, something that I try to be very, very mindful of.
And it's so interesting. I love having these conversations because, like, you pick up tips and tricks from other people who have tried different things in different areas and what may have worked and whatnot. We heard from someone the other day who said, you know what, like we gave crew camelbacks, like the little backpacks with water, and they just always just had them. And I was like, in 10 years, how come I have never thought about that? Like, you know what I mean? Like that is such a great idea. And, that's, so anyway, it's stuff like that comes up when you're trying to solve problems and you're working it through and you're chatting with other people. And I find that just so exciting about the topic and about what we can do and all the possibilities and tips and tricks. So
that's great. And those camelbacks, because I don't have a state-of-the-art one, but if they have ones that can stay cool and you fill them with ice too, that's a dual mechanism of bringing comfort to crew, cooling them while they're working in these conditions, as well as hydrating. So, you can work on that. That's a great crew gift to give out at the end of the year.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a fun one. So I'm just curious, I'm sure this hasn't been a cakewalk, getting into the film industry and working through it. I'm just curious, what have been the challenges? What have been the places where you've seen gaps and you're like, well, somebody should solve for that, and then just, the pace of the industry, all of it. I'm just curious, what have you noticed? What are the challenges that you've come up against, and are they still there? And how can we solve for it?
You mean specifically for sustainability?
It could be that, or just in general in the industry. I mean, we have, listeners that are, film students and just across the board. So trying to just understand the pathway, where to try and look and improve and, make a mark.
No, that's a great question. I mean, on the sustainability front, and this is a few years ago, but I remember having a conversation with a line producer who wanted to be more sustainable and paperless. But she said to me, look, Valerie, for me to be paperless, it will take me 4 times as long to do my reports, my payroll, my everything. Because right now with paper, I can have the 2 things here and compare them and write them in, but there's no link between all the digital, programs for information to be sent from this to that to this. So I think, a panel I've always wanted to do is, a panel of people who are very pro sustainability or are doing it, and people who are like, yeah, no, this doesn't work for me, and getting that conversation, because I truly believe, especially like with my science brain, if we know exactly what the stopgap is, we can work to solve it. But people don't take that time. And then, that's how politics come into it. People just feel judged or forced into something that, nobody's considering what the, negative side is. And then you start to have divisions, and you have people who just, as a blanket rule, are not into sustainability because it, creates these other problems. So I think just like in this entire country with the politics that are going on, we need to understand why people might have a problem with something. And it sometimes is a very simple fix. This is off topic, so use it or not, but it goes back to curiosity. A friend of mine, Kristen Siggins, wrote this book called The Power of Curiosity. And she tells the story of how when her son was in preschool, he's 4 years old, and she's like, look, we got to go. We're late, as, parents often feel. And he's like, I can't, I need to change my pants. And she's like, no, we don't have time. We have to go. We're going to be late. And they argued for like 20 minutes, tears. And she said, finally, after 20 minutes, says, why do you need to change your pants? He said, because my dinosaur's in my other pair of pants. And had she gotten that information right away by saying why, that would have taken 2 seconds. She would have said, oh, go get the dinosaur and let's go. And he would have been happy. She would have been happy. The relationship would have been intact. And so I think that's an example of maybe what we can do with sustainability or AI is start to ask the why. Like, how does this impact you? What are the problems it creates for you? And just take the time and start bridging those gaps and move slower, right? Let's evolve a little more slowly so that everybody moves together forward and nobody feels left behind, because the worst is when people just feel left behind and they're the minority and the majority is going some other way. That just creates divisions that cause more problems later. So
I think your point is, and also just being curious in general. I mean, even in any interpersonal relationship stuff and anywhere, right? I mean, I think just it's a nonviolent communication way of addressing or trying to find or get to the root cause of it. And I think that's really important.
I think so too. Yeah.
One of the things that I'm, I, in what you just said, one of the words that I find to be triggering to people is time. The word time. Anything that, where there's a perceived, time commitment, or, you're asking, someone to slow down or whatever. I find that to be a little tricky because we're always up against such tight timelines, and people feel stressed about that and be able, to perform their job, do it well in such a crunch. How do you address that?
I think you're right. And I feel the same thing. And, the hardest days for me are when I'm more focused on time than I want to be, right? If I'm feeling behind or, things, we've had a lightning strike. And so now we have less time to do it. And I think, and it's never a good headspace to be in. I think it's
Yeah.
really important to reframe and remember what the objective is instead of just finishing. I had my thesis advisor, Jim Hogel, who is an amazing man. And he said to me, what people always remember most about you is how you finish. And so you could have a great start out of the gate at the beginning of your day, at the beginning of your show, at the beginning of your career, but how you finish is what people remember. And so being able to take that extra breath, being able to stay curious and be present and solve the problem or communicate and say, I hear you, that is a problem. Let's address it tomorrow because today we're up against it. And so just trust me, we'll come back to it. Might be, a good response. Also, I think the saying measure twice, cut once. It's for a director, it's all about prep. We have 7 to 10 days to prep a show and being incredibly prepared, but also sharing that vision with your assistant director, your DP, on a Tony and Ziva at the NCIS show that's coming out in a month. We shared our shot list with like 27 people. We were like, who wants our shot list? And, people wanted it because they wanted to know, what does the day look like? Hair wanted to know, am I going to see the back of the head of this person, for instance? Like what's the shot? Art department could make decisions if they knew what my plan was. And so I find sharing the information, but sometimes having people just know that you have a plan and you're taking care of it helps them trust when time gets squeezed. And so you bring up a really good point, and it's an ongoing journey, I think, for me to learn how we can handle that issue. But these are some of the things that have really, really helped me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's super helpful. I mean, I guess, it's interesting from a director's perspective, what that communication pathway would be, what others might find helpful. That's new insight for me. And
It's important for people to be heard, especially, actors. If you're, sometimes you're like, oh, we got to go, but something's not feeling right to them, or the costume is making them feel uncomfortable. And you don't want to just brush past that and be like, well, we have to shoot. It will take less time and be more satisfying to the product, the relationship, to the human aspect of it, to get curious and say, well, why? Because a lot of times it is something that you can fix, or it's a conversation, or if there's no fix, showing empathy and saying, I'm sorry, we don't have a fix for that. How do we move forward together? And I think that is just important, especially as we get more automated. I mean, how's AI going to deal with that, right? Is AI going to make people feel heard and cared for? I don't know. Maybe it will. Maybe it'll be better than us, but it's definitely something that as we get more efficient and move faster, it would be a big mistake to overlook.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Just a question for you and advice for young filmmakers, right? So, it's a brave new world out there, new tech, industries in upheaval, everything's shifting. What advice do you have for young filmmakers, either already in the industry or getting into it or mid-career even?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, it's kind of the same advice, I heard when I was a kid. If this is the only thing you can do, you have to do it, right? In some ways, I think the choice is easier to do this because there's no guarantees. There's no perfect job anymore that you can be sure is going to exist in the future.
No one's having a pension.
No, having a pension. One of my daughters is a ballerina and pursuing that. And I wholeheartedly support the idea of her doing that because, it's her passion and she knows how hard she has to work, and it's her decision. And so, and again, look, AI is not going to replace ballet. Probably it might be the most secure job in the future.
That's true.
So I would say, be really clear about why you're doing it and if it really is what you want to do. I don't think anything's changed. It was hard to get in, for me as a woman. They were not hiring women until, for the first 10, 15 years of my career. And that took an incredible amount of faith for my friends and I to stick with it. So yes, that's the first thing, is get clear on why and that you want to do it. And then the principles are still the same. You have to tell a good story, and you have to be really, really good at your craft. And there's no excuse not to be now. You have every tool at your disposal without having to spend a lot of money or go to film school. So it's learning and practicing and doing. And I do think cream rises to the top. So you just work really, really hard and stay focused on what the goal is.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And also knowing how to leverage the new media, right? Because we're consuming more and more media than ever. I mean, same with like music, right? If you're a musician, I mean, you can still get a YouTube video that'll have millions of views. I mean, it's still possible, right?
100%.
So like leveraging that new tech in a way that gets your voice heard. Yeah, I love that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What are you working on now?
So I just finished a great show for Amazon and Wonder called It's Not Like That. So I'm editing that right now. And I'm about to go off to Toronto to do the first block of season 4 of Ginny and Georgia. And then I'm actually using my science background. I'm going to go do Watson for CBS. And I have a couple of movies. I have a Nutcracker ballet comedy movie that is the tone of Meet the Parents that I'm about to start taking out.
Oh, wow. Sounds
Amazing.
fun. Very good. Very good. One question that we ask all of our guests, and I'm really curious to hear your answer. If you were to create a new playbook that has guiding principles about sustainability and entertainment, what would be first on your list?
Well, we actually have an incredible resource on the DGA website. We created this pro tips manual. And what's great is you can search by, the DGA has directors, assistant directors, stage managers, UPMs, and you can click on it by your profession, and you can learn all about how your profession within the industry can be more sustainable, from on screen to behind the scenes. So it's so comprehensive. So I would probably just co-opt that and and point people to that. But reducing fuel is really the issue, and shooting, trying to shoot locally. It's build the LA industry back up and keeping production. That would be really fantastic. We have incredible crews, and I love working abroad too. So I hope productions keep happening there as well. But we really do need to, I think, let people sleep in their own beds at night.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, gosh, not to get it, that's a whole nother podcast, but I totally agree. There's such an opportunity to really lean in LA. A lot of stuff going on there, a lot of crew are local, a lot of facilities, and all this stuff. So yeah. Well, where can people find you and learn more about your work?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on Instagram. My Instagram handle is at Valerie. Hold on, I have to.
Oh, I think we have it too.
You have it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, at valerie.weiss.director.
Yeah, I saw that. Okay, great. And so folks can catch up with you there, see what you're up to. That's fantastic. Really, really appreciate having this conversation with you and hearing your perspective and how you're approaching this work. It's super interesting.
And how you've blazed trail for women in film.
I know.
Well.
Thank you, guys. I'm so appreciative of you having this podcast and spreading this message and chatting with me today. It's great.
Yeah, thanks.
Our designer is Aaliyah Kane. Music is by Peter Chapman. Social media is by Picnic Social. Our editor and producer is Rachel Werble.